All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Paranormal Library program. We're really excited to share this with you. Today we'll be hearing from author Dana McSwain, author and paranormal researcher Sherri Brake, and the Massillon Paranormal Research Association. After our presenters are done speaking, we will have some time for a Q&A. Now I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Sherri Brake.
How's everybody doing? We doing good? All right, awesome. I want to thank the Massillon Public Library for having us here today. Very excited to be here because you know what the alternative is? To not be somewhere, right? Any day above ground is a good day indeed. So I thought I'd take us on a little trip here. Each of us speakers have about 20 minutes. And since we're in Ohio, I thought I'd focus a little bit on Haunted Ohio. So these are locations that you might be familiar with and you might not be familiar with. So a little housekeeping. You're a great friend, but if zombies chase us, I'm tripping you. That's a joke. You can laugh. I own Haunted Heartland Tours, based out of West Virginia now, but I did start it back in 2002 with some haunted walking tours in Canal Fulton, which of course is here in Stark County. So I have had my tour business for 19 years, next year, 20 years. Very excited. My very first book was Haunted Stark County, focused a lot on Canton, Massillon area. It was a real joy to write. And the only thing I hated about doing this book for the publisher is you're very limited. You're limited with what you can say, the amount of words that you use, and the images that you use. So after that book, I've done quite a few books now. I'm up to about 25 books and manuals and journals, sketchbooks, things like that. I'm also a columnist. This is my best-selling book. This is available at Amazon. I also have it here. It's The Haunted History of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Quite a mouthful. What a spooky location this is. What a historical location this is. And this is in Weston, West Virginia. My kids, perfectly normal. They're a lot older now. And they still dress and go out for Halloween, so go figure, in their late 20s. I've been blessed to have received some awards. My ghost hunting tours have been in the top 5 USA Today, which is a big deal. I've worked on some television shows, PBS, Ghost Hunters, Most Terrifying Places in America, and I've really enjoyed sharing my history, my knowledge, and my experiences. One of the places that I love telling people about is north of here. It's on Sandusky Bay. It is Johnson's Island Confederate Cemetery. And this was used as a prison back during the Civil War. You can see here there's plenty of graves in this cemetery. It's very historical, but very haunted. Dating back into about the 1920s, there was a group of quarry workers who were working in a local quarry on the island, and this horrific storm came across the bay, and they sought shelter under the trees here in the cemetery. And much to their shock and amazement, as they were cowering there under the thunder and lightning, they looked up, and this statue had turned its head and was looking back over the graves of the fallen dead. So that's a pretty cool story. Next up, we go to Cincinnati, Eden Park. Imogene Remus is said to haunt this gazebo in the park. Many years ago, she'd been married to George. He ended up murdering her in the park, October the 6th, 1927, and Imogene's ghost is seen haunting the area there, typically in a dark dress that she was murdered in. She is known to reappear every fall. That would be like an anniversary ghost showing up on the anniversary of her murder. A little closer to home here, Canton, Ohio. Maybe you guys have driven past this. It's the Hercules engine factory downtown. I have heard that they have built some beautiful apartments and condos there. Have you ever seen the movie Poltergeist? Yeah, there are some unmarked graves under the paved lot of this factory dating back to 1917, 1918 with the influenza epidemic, when there were so many people that perished and died from this horrific epidemic that the local funeral homes didn't have enough time to bury the bodies, so sometimes they would stack these bodies up. And down in the basement of the Hercules engine factory, there happened to be an ice-making company. So that worked out really well when you needed to cold storage some of the dead before they were buried. So that's a very Very intriguing building indeed, Hercules Engine Factory. We're going to go out west here just a little bit in Ohio, a little farther west to Mansfield. If you folks are familiar with the Mansfield Reformatory, this is just south of there, southeast. This is Malabar Farm. This is a great place to go and investigate. Not only do they have a very large, beautiful mansion there on the property, but they also have this little farmhouse here. And this is the farmhouse that Celie Rose lived in with her family. Now, Celie had a sweetheart of a boyfriend who lived on the farm next to them, and her parents didn't really want her to see him. And he wasn't really exactly infatuated with Celie either, but Miss Celie believed that if she could murder the members in her family that disapproved of their love affair, then perhaps her and the next door neighbor could get together. So she put arsenic in their breakfast food and killed her mother and killed her father. So the house is allegedly still haunted by the ghost of Celie Rose. Celie was convicted of her crimes and is buried out in the old Lima State Hospital Cemetery. Celie Rose, just a young girl. Majestic Theater in Chillicothe. Has anybody been there before? What a grand building this is. This was built in 1852, just like the old theaters, very grand. The location has earned its reputation as one of the most haunted theaters in all of Ohio because, again, during the influenza epidemic of 1917, 1918, bodies of the dead were stored in the theater. And if you're an investigative paranormal researcher, you understand that sometimes when there's death, there's trauma, sad history, you have bodies that have been piled up waiting for burial. Sometimes all of that energy from those events gets left behind. And that's the reason why we think that the Majestic Theater is haunted. Tuscarawas County, heading one county south, we have Zore Village. Has anybody ever been to Zore? This town is amazing. It's owned by the Ohio Historical Society. There are about a dozen buildings in this quaint German town that is owned and maintained by the Zore Community Association as well. A lot of dark history with these buildings, specifically in the magazine building. You can see it has a new addition on the front of it there, but the building I'm talking about in particular is the log structure. And if you're familiar with Haunted Ohio series by Chris Woodyard, this author wrote probably a dozen books on the state of Ohio, and she mentions this magazine building in Zore as being one of the most haunted in the entire state. We have a photograph here that was taken from one of the guests on my haunted tour for the evening, and you can see this really unusual white mist that appeared. Fog, to the best of my knowledge, does not appear inside a building. Nobody smokes when we do our investigations, so you pretty much rule out either one of those. This building is one of those buildings that when you walk in, you feel like you're not alone, but you're the only person in the room. Very cool place to explore. Also there at Zore, we have the infamous Zore Hotel. The village was settled back in 1817, and when they bought this hotel, it brought in outsiders. And the Zoreites were a very close-knit religious group. They weren't about money, they weren't about fancy dresses, fancy carriages, or anything like that. But when they built this hotel, people like President McKinley would come and visit. They had all these grand parties inside the hotel. And many of the Zoreites believed that the building of the hotel kind of cursed the area. It brought in all of these people with money, and a lot of the young girls that were Zoreites were kind of swayed to a life out of the Zore community because of the riches that they saw. Inside the hotel, people have heard the sounds of glasses clinking together as if somebody is toasting with champagne. They've heard the sound of music playing when there's nobody in the room. We've also had instances where people swear that there is a ghost dog. It approaches them, licks their leg, licks their hand. I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of nice to know that they continue on in the afterlife as well. One of our curious photographs was taken in the attic of the Zore Hotel, and you see like a glowing ball of light here. That's your typical orb, but very perfect in size. It's got that glowing energy to it. Now, if you ask a dozen ghost hunters or investigators what is an orb, everybody's going to have a different story or a different theory. Some of us believe that it's the soul, it's the spirit, it's the essence of the body. Some people believe that it's just a sign that there's possible energy in the area, paranormal activity. And others believe it's just dust. But I find it interesting that it's right there in the middle of the doorway as if it followed us into that room. This is another area of the hotel where there is some activity. This door has been seen opening and closing on its own, and it's a rather large, heavy door. We're going to go back out to the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield. This is one of my favorite buildings to explore. This opened up in 1896. It closed in 1990. There were thousands of young men and boys who were incarcerated here at the very beginning because it was a reformatory. They built it to inspire you. This grand castle here that was constructed and designed by Levi Schofield. They wanted to uplift you, make you walk the path of righteousness. But what happened is in the 70s and in the 1980s, you started getting murderers, rapists, people that committed very violent crimes were incarcerated there. And there were murders that took place, and there were suicides that took place. My second book, The Haunted History of the Ohio State Reformatory, came from my experiences and also the darker history there at the Mansfield Reformatory. You see, among many of the prisoners and inmates, they believed that if you die in prison, your soul would be staying in prison. That's the reason why there's so much energy. That's why people claim to see apparitions and have many experiences there in the hallways of that building in Mansfield. This is several pieces of shank, very dangerous items that these inmates would make to kill each other with. Something as simple as a toothbrush could be sharpened on the concrete floor of your cell and made into some type of a dagger or a knife to kill the inmate that you didn't get along with. So there were murders that happened there behind those bars. Here we have another perfectly round, glowing ball of light that appeared towards the ceiling. This is actually looking from the ground up, you see the tiers there of the prison. And I believe that might have been in the east cell block. The entities that are said to haunted this building are curious indeed, because it would be Warden Glatke and his wife, Helen. Helen was accidentally shot when a pistol discharged that fell out of the top of her closet as she was getting dressed for Mass. The pistol hit the ground, discharged, and shot her through the chest, and she ended up passing away. It's said that she haunts the reformatory. Maybe not her apparition, but when she's around, people swear they smell roses. It's as if somebody stuck a bouquet of roses right underneath your nose, and then the roses leave the area, and the feelings as well leave the area. Cold spots have been associated with her presence as well. I've held many events over the last 19 years inside the reformatory. One of the best ones that I do, and I have the most fun at, is a death by dessert ghost hunt. Anytime you can mix chocolate with a ghost hunt, it's a great experience. I think so. So that's my selfish event that I love to hold. This is one of our paranormal photographs that was taken inside the prison. I really think if you take a look at this, it's almost like there's a misty little child that's standing right there. The X is made by natural light coming in from windows and opposing sides of the prison. It's an architectural detail, and it makes the X right there. We were on tour that evening, and a lot of people had felt the feeling there's something here or there's something going on. The EMF meters were spiking. The investigative gear that we use was showing an anomaly in the area, and we captured that little image. It's like a little boy standing right up against the wall. Athens, Ohio. Farther south, southwest, we have the West State Street Cemetery and the angel who weeps. Not only does she weep, but if you stand next to her, people swear that they hear the fluttering of angel wings. And if you look closely at her face when you go to visit, you can almost see little lines where tears have fallen from her eyes. She stands guard over the unknown graves of the soldiers in this part of the cemetery. Not too far away, still hanging out there in Athens, is the Athens Lunatic Asylum. This place is absolutely amazing. Built in 1874, closed down in 1993. Of course, it is not an asylum anymore, and you're really not permitted to go any farther than just the first level of the building. So if you think that you can go there and explore the hallways, they won't let you do that, but they will let you pay a donation, and you are welcome to explore the Kennedy Art Center, which is located on the first level of the building. The most active area, though, would be if you could get access to these stairs and go upstairs, because this room is the most active in this building. When they closed the asylum down in 1993, they were to take all of the patients and transfer them to other facilities. Somehow they missed a woman. She was found weeks later, naked. She had removed her clothes, piled them next to her, and had laid down on her back in this exact spot, and that's where they found her deceased. They have tried and tried and tried to remove the stain that was left on the floor. I don't know if you can see it in this photograph or not, but upon close examination on the laptop, you can see it a little bit better. There's the outline of a woman laying here with her arms right here in this area. And it's said that she is one of many entities that haunts the Athens Lunatic Asylum. This is a little bit better photograph, perhaps, if you can see the outline there, just a little bit. Here's another place. This is in Maumee, Ohio, near Toledo. The Battle of Fallen Timbers. This is an old one, 1794. It involved General Mad Anthony Wayne and his men. They defeated a group of Indians that was led by Blue Jacket, which I'm sure if you remember your Ohio history, you probably remember him. 33 men perished in this battle, and it's said that they still haunt the battlefield. Folks that go there and walk around on the field report the smell of gunpowder, gun smoke. They've seen images of campfires off in the distance burning, but when they look again, they're gone. And they've seen the images of soldiers walking across the field. So they say the ghosts of the lost souls still reenact the blood battle. Buxton Inn, Granville, Ohio. I just love a place that you can go and spend the night, especially if it's haunted. You guys like that? You know, you go someplace, a haunted hotel, a haunted bed and breakfast. I always try to seek one out when I'm traveling. There are several ghosts that allegedly haunt this location, and the people that own the Buxton Inn welcome you to come and investigate. There's been really bizarre sounds, strange knockings that are in the lower basement area. The basement door is also known to open and close by itself mysteriously, and there's all kinds of reports of disembodied footsteps from up above. A disembodied footstep is the sound of somebody walking, but there ain't nobody walking. It's disembodied voice. Ohio River, this is my last one here. This is a little bit of a bloody story to share with you. This is the Levee House Cafe in Marietta. Back in the old days with the Ohio River right there, it was quite an important and popular place for trade. Anytime you brought boats in, you had men. Anytime you had men, well, you needed women. So this ended up being a brothel, a house of ill repute, a home for soiled doves, if you like that term better. So here at the Levee House Cafe, there was a man that was killed by his son as he visited a local prostitute. His son snuck up on him and took an axe and beheaded his father while he was with the woman. And it is said that he, headless as he is, haunts the area here at the Levee House Cafe. It has been several things over the last few years, and I believe that this building is closed, but if it ever opens up again, you need to go here. because people report the apparition walking around the floor of the restaurant. So this is my little view of haunted Ohio. There's a lot to cover in the state, but I wanted to pick some different locations for you to check out. I hope if you ever do get a chance that maybe you go to the Buxton Inn, spend the night, maybe go to the Ohio State Reformatory, walk the hallways where the Shawshank Redemption was filmed, and have a good time. So this is my portion of it. I thank you for your time. And up next, I am going to introduce Dana McSwain. Ready when you are. I'm going to click back to this frame here.
Thank you so much, Sherri. Sherri's such a good storyteller, I almost forgot I was here to present. And then she looked at me. I thought, oh dear, I'm up. I'd like to tell you a ghost story. In 2010, my family and I bought an abandoned house on the shores of Lake Erie. The house was over 100 years old and had passed through only a handful of other caretakers before coming to us. We had the same dreams many people do, restoring the beautiful Tudor Revival to its original condition, living in a piece of local history, then passing it on to another caretaker in the future, better than we found it. I'd never lived in an old house before, let alone one that had been abandoned for years. It was like moving into a giant dollhouse. I grew up in a rural part of the state, in a split-level house, under the crackling bodies of high-voltage power lines, next to an abandoned sewer treatment facility in the 70s. And although everyone was poor then, it seemed somehow my family was always poor. You can imagine how enchanted I was by this magnificent ruin, the dual staircases, spirit doors, the maid's quarters and butler's pantry, the oversized stone fireplace, a ramshackle potting shed filled with old terracotta pots and gardening tools. Even the dark, dank root cellars and coal bin delighted me. I had done my research. I expected creaking floorboards and groaning doors, voices that would carry strangely from upstairs, downstairs, and outside. Thick plaster walls filled with delicate lathing that would breathe differently with each season. We had a sobering list of repairs that had to be made and accepted the fact that we would be living like squatters for years until the house was finished. But what I did not expect was the warnings from the neighbors, the personality of the house itself, and the inhabitants that were already there, watching and waiting as we, the new caretakers, settled in. I never expected I would be sharing my house with the echoes of happiness, loss, and anger that had saturated the walls of our home long before I was born. My first clue that the house was as alive as I was came from our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chambers. A few days after we moved in, I saw her sweeping her driveway and went out to introduce myself. She was in her late 80s then, an Irish immigrant who had never lost her rich accent. As we made small talk, I noticed her eyes kept careful watch on the house behind me, scanning the windows as I told her about our plans to restore it. "Terrible thing," she said, suddenly interrupting me. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I said terrible thing, young lady. What happened in your fine new house? It was a terrible thing. Her and her parties and gardens, him and his fancy car and his music." I let the moment pass and decided to change the conversation, concerned that perhaps my elderly neighbor was confused. I invited her to come over for tea soon so we could get to know each other properly. "Not in that house," she said. She began walking away, keeping her eyes always trained on the house behind me. "I'll never set foot in that house again." My husband assured me it was nothing more than the ramblings of a confused old woman, nothing to worry about. And then he left, back to traveling for work for weeks on end. After all, someone had to pay for the enormous undertaking of restoring the house. But shortly after he left, the house told me otherwise. My children were in elementary school at the time, and their rooms were in separate wings of the house. My daughter had chosen the maid's quarters at the back of the house, my son the large front room. My room was somewhere in between, separated from them by a sitting room and a long gallery balcony overlooking the dining room. So they slept with me for those first few weeks, me, my 2 children, and our 3 dogs, all cozied up with the doors to my bedroom shut tight against the cavernous house that each night suddenly seemed too big, too dark, too resonant. The dogs heard it first. Not that they barked, rather what woke me was the absence of their snoring, the sound of them holding their breath. I opened my eyes and noticed 2 things almost at the same time. The dogs were all pointed sphinx-like at the bedroom door, and just outside the door, footsteps. Heavy, loud, the sound of a tall man in dress shoes pacing the length of the gallery between my son's room and my own. I rose from the bed and the dogs shifted, only to put themselves between me and the door. "Hello," I whispered. "Who's there?" The footfalls paused and then resumed their pacing. I looked at the dogs. Their lips were drawn back over their teeth, but now they were encircled around my sleeping children. And I knew in that moment that there was no physical being pacing in that hallway, and nothing, not even $1 million, would have made me open that door. So I locked it and pushed a nightstand in front of it, then locked the other doors into the bedroom as well. I looked under the door, but saw nothing but darkness, and heard nothing but the crisp fall of his shoes on the hardwood floor. I knelt there and listened for the next hour as the pacing continued, back and forth, and then faded away just before dawn. When I opened the door in the morning, I found nothing. The dogs took a great deal of convincing to leave the room, and even once they did, avoided the path the footsteps had taken. All was quiet again, but when I went into the kitchen, I found one gas burner on the ancient stove, lit and flickering blue. That was our introduction to the man of the house. The stove was the first thing to go. He only visited us when there was tension in the house. There was something angry and sad about his visits. Some nights I would be awakened by the soft strains of big band music wafting up the staircase from the dining room. When I would lean over the balcony to try and discern the song, the music would vanish to be replaced by an angry buzzing, the sounds of a long-ago argument drowning inside. While researching the house, I learned that the second owners of the property, who had lived in the house for 40 years, had been known for their big band cocktail parties, were also known to drive around town in a fancy convertible. She was the president of the local garden society, and his business held a patent for fire hose nozzles. They were wealthy and beautiful, and the envy of everyone at their country club. He contracted pancreatic cancer and died slowly and alone, with only the company of a nurse in the front bedroom, my son's room 20 years prior. She married her high school sweetheart 6 weeks after he died and never returned to the house. A small, sad story that echoed in the hallways of our home with his nighttime pacing. There were other voices echoing in our house, and we had nicknames for them all: the girls on the stair, the washerwoman, and the angel. Some days, usually when it was bright and sunny, the clouds raced across the sky, we would hear the voices of 2 young girls calling to each other as they ran up the back staircase to the maids' quarters. Their laughing, happy voices would trail off before they reached my daughter's bedroom door, right by the chimney to the incinerator. Some days it would play on a loop, and I would sit to one side of the hall and listen to them grow louder and louder, and then vanish over and over again, until finally their echoes wound down and disappeared. The washerwoman was so called because she hated our dryer. Frequently, when I turned the dryer on in the basement laundry and went upstairs, I would later find my clothing still wet and the dryer door wide open. We went through 3 dryers in that house, and she hated every one of them. And I could never be sure that she was to blame. But there was a spot on the cellar floor, just in front of the oversized porcelain laundry sinks, that wept thick and red when it rained. Not paint, but some sort of crimson mineral deposit that resisted all of our efforts to excavate or eliminate it. I never encountered the angel myself. My son told me about her one day, and honestly, I still get chills when I think about that conversation. He was in 4th grade, and he said, "Mom, I like my new room, but I don't like the angel." I stopped what I was doing and repeated, "The angel?" "Yeah," he said, "I don't like it when she touches me." You can imagine my reaction. He told me that some nights a silence would wake him up, and he would just know that he was not alone. He would hear something sliding up the wall behind his bed, as if rising from the floor below, moving in the walls. He said he would close his eyes tight and pray for it to go away. And then he would feel someone gently touch his forehead, and a finger trail softly down the length of his nose, and then disappear. "It's an angel, right, Mom? But I still don't like it." "I'll ask her to stop," I said, because what else could I say? And I did. I sat in his room one day when he was at school and explained to an empty room that she was frightening him. He never mentioned her again. And I can't say who she was, but I can tell you that when we had the front section of the house outside his window removed, the contractors found the evidence of a fierce fire that had been poorly repaired at least 70 years prior. And when we remodeled the kitchen, we found an entire walled-off room, maybe 5 feet by 7 feet, hidden behind a built-in cabinet, directly below my son's room. and it too had been walled off sometime in the 40s, at the same time as the fire. We made peace with the inhabitants of our house and learned to live around them, and for their part, they eventually learned to live with us and to give us our space, most of the time. And by the time we moved, they had fallen completely silent. I don't know who or what they were, but I can tell you what they felt like. They felt like echoes bleeding through time, old lives playing out scenes from long ago days, old souls revisiting a place that meant something to them. There was, however, one soul that persisted long after the others had drifted back into their slumber, and she is the inspiration behind my award-winning horror novel, Roseneath. Her name is Edith. Shortly after we moved in, I began dreaming that there was a little girl in our attic. Each night after I fell asleep, I would climb the stairs to our attic. Behind the door, in the moonlit glow under the dormer windows, was a little girl. Scattered around her was a small assortment of broken toys. And all she wanted was for someone to play with her. Night after night, I played with the little girl and did what I could to cheer her up. She was sweet and funny and liked it when I read to her. But she always looked at the attic door with caution and insisted she could not go downstairs. She seemed frightened of something she could not explain, so I didn't press her. As the weeks and months went on, I thought I was losing my mind a little bit. I would spend all day wondering if the little girl would be there. Some nights in my dreams, I would climb the attic stairs but stop just short of opening the door, too exhausted and sad to play with her that night. And yet somehow my little ghost seemed to understand and would never mention it when I finally did open her door days later. I thought we would carry on like this forever. But one day I climbed the attic stairs and noticed that Edith had changed. She was taller, her face less round, her arms and legs gangly. My little ghost in the attic was growing and maturing, there was no doubt about it. It seemed like the more time I spent with her and the attention that I paid to her was fueling this transformation. I watched over the weeks as she shifted from child to adolescent to teenager. Most ghosts you read about are frozen at the moment of their death, but what if? Just what if a ghost could grow? And if it did, what would a ghost grow up into? These dreams of a little ghost named Edith inspired a gothic horror story about a young couple, Georgia and Nathan Pritchard, who move into an abandoned estate named Roseneath. Georgia finds the ghost of a lost child and her own version of heaven in the attic. However, in the cellar below, her husband Nathan finds something darker and is lured into his own personal hell, and the only thing that can breach the divide between this world and the next and close Roseneath's hellish gates is the ghost of a little girl who can grow. I'd like to read you a small excerpt from my book in which Georgia first meets the ghost in the attic. She was little more than a charcoal sketch, the barest hint of a child rendered in shades of ash and dove. The book of nursery rhymes floated impossibly on the hastily drawn lines of her gauzy knees. In one sooty little hand, the almost girl clutched Georgia's watch. Her brow was drawn in a delicate frown as she studied it, the only sound in the attic, the tick, tick, tick of the second hand. Her expressions shifted bewilderingly, as if her artist could not make up their mind, perplexed, worried, rapt, the ticking of a second hand marking each shift. Then the shade of a child bent to peer at the silent phone. When she tried to poke it with one chalky finger, it passed right through. "Bother," she whispered. "What ratty luck." Georgia sat up with great care, afraid to startle the specter in front of her. The girl's black eyes flicked to hers, and as it did, the fragile vision rippled, exploding for one brief tick of the watch into a burst of color and clarity before settling back to ashes. A stubborn nose peppered unevenly with freckles, skin like moonglow, tiny white teeth. The lock of hair that hung over her shoulder was maple syrup, appearing briefly in the spreading ripples before fading once more to shades of smoke. Chubby little hands with dimples clutched the watch. A tattered dress was drawn tightly over her grimy knees where she crouched. Her body was pocked with dark wounds, the center of each a pinprick blacker than ink. Georgia wanted to speak, but was dumbstruck by the tender magnitude of the moment. What words could possibly suffice? Instead, she held her breath and the girl's gaze. As the watch ticked off the seconds, the child's eyes dazzled in an unexpected maze of heterochromia, ocean salt over mossy stones. They gazed at each other for hours or seconds, a moment that passed in dream time. How long is forever? Sometimes forever is just 1 second. And finally, Georgia knew exactly what to say. Cautiously, she pulled her knees to her chest. Then she fluttered her fingers against the floor, catching the girl's attention. Hickory, dickory, dock. Georgia made her fingers dance on the floor, let them scamper onto the instep of her foot. The little girl watched closely. The mouse ran up the clock. Her fingers scampered up her leg and alighted on her kneecap. The child's eyes followed. The clock struck 1. She mimed a startled mouse with her fingers, and the little ghost's mouth popped open, surprised. And down he run. Her fingers fled down her leg, hid behind her heel like a frightened mouse. The child moved closer, like smoke drafting across the floor, to see where Georgia's hand had gone. Georgia suppressed a shiver and tried not to flinch. Hickory, dickory, dock! Not a petulant whisper this time. The child sang out like a robin in springtime and then giggled, as if charmed by the sound of her own voice. Georgia crossed her legs, drawing out each movement so as to not frighten the apparition away. Shall we do another? The girl nodded, scattering ashes around her on the attic floor that curled up and vanished even as they landed. The watch fell through her hand, landing on the attic floor with a clatter. Bunk, she complained, studying her own hand as if to scold it. Have I spoiled it? Not at all. Never mind the watch. It's your turn. Georgia smiled encouragingly at her. The girl beamed, then studied the ceiling. Mary, Mary. She tried again. Mary, Mary. She looked at Georgia for help, chagrined. Quite contrary, Georgia prompted. Recognition flashed in the child's eyes before she sang out the following verse in a mad sing-song rush. How does your garden grow? She exclaimed, with silver bells and cockle shells. Then she broke off and waited, her pert nose wrinkled impishly. And pretty maids, all in a row, Georgia finished. The child's face lit up for one prismatic second, and then, slower this time, faded back to chalk and shale. Georgia knew she should be afraid. But sitting there in the sunlight with this little soul, fear felt like a sacrilege, an insult to this guileless visitation. Every shred of sense inside her told her to run, but instead, Georgia crept closer. My name is Georgia. I'm very glad to meet you. The child shimmered once more and floated closer, uncomfortably close to Georgia. Her scent was familiar and oddly comforting, like old blankets and dust. Her runes blurred, swirled, and then vanished. She smiled, and twin dimples appeared on her cheeks. Edith. A flush appeared on those fair cheeks. My name is Edith. She extended her hand, and without thinking, Georgia reached for it. Nothing. I feel nothing. And yet there was something in the air that hadn't been there before, like the smell of ozone before a lightning strike. Gingerly, as if handling a cobweb, Georgia shook Edith's vaporous hand. How do you do? She chirped. There was no real substance to it, just a shimmering outline wavering in the spaces between Georgia's fingers. Closing her eyes, Georgia could almost feel something petal light. Very well. And how do you do, Edith? The child exploded again into a supernova of color and detail, burning into Georgia's retinas the whole image of a little girl, complete and shining, filled with life. It vanished almost as soon as it appeared, but the memory floated in her eye, a glamour that lingered on, superimposed over the subtle creature in front of her. Georgia. Her voice was as delicate as a wind chime. Yes? Georgia searched the child's face, wondering what caused her to look so bashful. Are you afraid of me? Georgia reached as if to tuck a lock of hair behind the girl's ear. She felt nothing, but a moment later, like a slow tide, the hair followed the track her fingers had made. The tousled curl tucked itself neatly behind the little ear. Why would I be afraid of you, Edith? Because I'm dead. Edith flushed, a pop of color in her otherwise sober face. She looked embarrassed, as if her whole world hung on Georgia's response. Well, that seems like a very silly reason to be scared of such a pretty little girl. Edith giggled, and the curl fell forward. This time, when Georgia reached for it, it ran ahead of her, smoothing itself into place. Papa called me Edie, she said shyly. Well then, shall I read to you some more, Edie? The girl opened her mouth to speak, but her reply was cut off by a door slamming downstairs. Georgia whirled her attention to the attic door, listening, her hands instinctively moving to protect the girl. She felt a soft sensation when she reached for Edie's hands, like feathers slipping between her fingers. Downstairs, Roseneath sighed, protested, then settled. Georgia looked back to the ashy child. Edith's eyes were wide, her mouth frozen in a terrified rose-tinted O, the color stark against her gray face. "What is it, Edie?" she whispered hoarsely. "Some dead things are very frightening," Edie whispered. It was just the house settling, she tried to assure the frightened child. But Edie shook her head, the lines of her face below her eyes blurred, and with a start, Georgia realized she was crying. Wounds bloomed again all over her body, and she shifted from sketch to smoke. "Is there someone else here? Someone like you?" Edie reached for her bruised throat. Her flickering fingers clutched the tattered collar of her dress in a fist. "Oh no, not like me. I'm not like anyone. Not anymore." Edie's cloudy hand suddenly felt heavy where Georgia still held it, almost corporal. Then it faded, lighter, 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 and the little girl was gone. Thank you so much. I think I'll turn it over to Brian now.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. I'm glad to see everybody here. My name is Brian Fain. I am the founder of the Massillon Paranormal Research Association. We were founded on September 1st, 2004. Originally, we started off as the Massillon Ghost Hunter Society, and we remained that until about 2017 when we changed our name to what it is now to better reflect on what we do, paranormal research. Our mission statement is that we are committed to helping our clients have a better understanding about their paranormal activity at their residence or place of business. We believe in the difference between an ordinary investigation and an extraordinary investigation is the amount of research that is done before their case. We believe in the quality of a case before quantity of cases. I had experience when I was very young. I experienced something I couldn't explain, so it kind of got me on this path. I started looking into it and researching it, and I was about 6 years old at the time. And as I got older, I kept experimenting and researching. My grandparents lived in Navarre, and they lived in front of and behind of a cemetery. There's one by their house. So as a kid, I was about 9 years old, I was thinking, well, gee, I wonder if ghosts were going from one cemetery to the other, visiting friends. Mind you, I was 9. So when I'd spend the night, I would take a recorder, and I'd set up at midnight, and I'd hit record, and I'd go to bed, and the next day I'd get up, and I'd listen back to the tape. I never heard anything, but what I didn't realize is that I was doing EVP research, electronic voice phenomenon, the capturing of disembodied voices on tape. So in 2004, I basically decided to start a group and do better research of it. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about our group and some of our cases. So before we do any house investigation, we do what's called a spirit profile. So when a client contacts us, we push their case out about a month. And we go to the library, a lot of times Massillon Library, and we research the history of their house, who lived there and who died there. And then from there, we find out when someone died, we basically look up their obituaries, the death certificate, and we try to figure out a mystery. Who's haunting them? And we base our questions off of what we find. And a lot of times it helps us narrow down of who's haunting a house. Our very first case took place in 2005. It was an old farmhouse. It was in a family since the Civil War. She contacted us. She was saying that they were having instances of hearing doors closing, people talking, and footsteps going up and down the stairs. So we went out with our equipment, and this is our first case. So during the case, myself and 2 other teammates were up in the attic, and we're asking questions. Now, before every investigation, I changed the batteries. And as we're up there in the dark attic, our flashlights start to dim. Our equipment, the battery starts to drop off. So later, upon reviewing the evidence that we collected, we have a voice saying they ain't cousins. And seeing that this house has been in the family, they probably realized that we weren't related to the family. And that happened at the exact same time we had been mentioning about our equipment batteries dying. So we went back to give the reveal to the customer, the client, and as I'm playing this EVP clip for them, we hear a loud bang come from the second floor. So I said, "Oh, is your husband home?" She goes, "No, I'm home by myself." So I run upstairs thinking there's something knocked over. Nothing was out of place. It was reacting to us getting evidence of a haunting. When we're not doing house investigations, we do cemetery investigations. Now, people will say, well, why cemeteries? There's probably nothing there. A lot of times we believe that spirits don't have an easy time accepting they've passed on, so they end up following their body to the grave. We've done a lot of research in a lot of local cemeteries in Stark County and the counties touching Stark. When we first got started, we went to a Canton cemetery, and we like to make notes on the recorder of where we're at, so that if we get an EVP, I can kind of relate back to roughly where we were at. And as we're leaving, there was a headstone with the last name of Bye, B-Y-E, which brought a little bit of a smile to our face. So my sister-in-law, points it out. So she says bye, my wife says bye, and I say bye. And we go home and we review the audio. We get to that part, my sister-in-law says bye, my wife says bye, I say bye, and then we hear a fourth bye. And it wasn't any of us. So that was a nice capture there. We've been on many of Sherri's tours before, and we also went to Mansfield Reformatory. And during this one investigation, we were in the basement. And there wasn't many rooms. There was like 5 rooms, so we're looking around. And we all kind of gathered back up, and we were talking. We hear this voice with our own ears say, bye. I'm sorry, hello. And it stopped us in our tracks. We thought, okay, there's somebody else down here. So we look around, and there's no one else down there with us. Again, we hear, hello, and it really caught our attention. Now, spirits basically have to have enough energy to imprint their voice on a recorder, let alone become a full-body apparition or verbally speak out loud. So I later emailed the Mansfield Reformatory, and they have reports of a little boy roaming around in the basement. In 2015, we got a call for an investigation of a person in Massillon. He was saying that they were seeing a faceless ghost. So we did a spirit profile, which didn't really yield any results of anyone really dying on property. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So we started the investigation, and we have done many investigations over the years at their house. One time we were there, it got really cold in the house after a while, and the fire detector started to beep, low battery. And it was in the fall, is when they usually have a lot of activity. So the thermostat batteries had died, and the fire detector batteries had died at the same time. And upon playing back the audio, we have a voice that we couldn't identify. It was just outside of what we could hear. So I went over a couple weeks later, and we're standing in the kitchen, and I'm talking to the client about their case. And on the counter is a bread knife. And as we're talking about what we experienced, I watched the bread knife pop off the counter and land at my feet. Looking down at the bread knife, I said, is that really necessary? The client was a little bit disturbed, but after 17 years of working in the field, I'm a little bit used to this. So we couldn't figure out who was haunting their house. So I decided to look at both neighbors. And the neighbor on their left-hand side, they went through many neighbors, kept moving out, move in, move out, move in, move out. And this was a rental. So I looked into that. Turns out back in the 50s, there was a woman that basically threw a bunch of newspapers and rubbish into a burning barrel, and whatever accelerant she used had a low flash point. When she lit the match and threw it in, the fire came up and basically burned her in the face extremely severe. So we believe this is a vine haunting. A vine haunting is when two houses will share a spirit. And of course, you're not going to tell your neighbor, hey, I'm having some weird stuff in my house, or how's yours? So the neighbors usually keep that kind of quiet. So we believe this is why people were moving in and out of that house so fast, because our client and the neighbor next door were sharing the same spirit. Sometimes when we do house investigations, it could take a while to get something, and this is why we do multiple investigations. On one case, we were talking to the clients upstairs, and they were saying that they have a nickname for their sister, and that nickname is Les. Upon reviewing of the audio, we hear them say this, and we hear a little girl say Les, which correlates to what they've been experiencing in the house. They keep experiencing the sounds of a little girl. So we also do business investigations. And we were contacted in 2009 by a business in Massillon. They asked us to investigate their building. A lot of the workers that worked there throughout the years has experienced stuff, and they wanted to know if the place was or was not haunted. So we agreed. Now, the reason why I could tell you this story is because normally we have a very strict client privacy policy. If you have an investigation with us, you'll sign a document that says we will never talk about your case, not where it's at, not any names or nothing. It keeps it very generic because we believe client privacy is important. But luckily they signed off so I can go public with this case. So we started the research, and it has a pretty good history of it. So we have basically done a total of 10 investigations of this building. And on one time we were sitting in some chairs. My team was in other parts of the building, and I was talking to the person that contacted us. I'm like, man, these chairs are really comfy. I'd probably fall asleep in them. He's like, yeah, people tend to do that, and we have to wake them up. Like, I just couldn't do that. Upon reviewing that audio, after I said that, we have a woman say they sleep here sometimes. And it was just myself and the other gentleman, which during our spirit profile, we found that 2 women died on property at different times of natural causes. On another investigation, my sister-in-law, who is also a member, was upstairs, and she asked the question, do you help them at night? When no one's here, do you basically take care of stuff? And we have another female that says no. So I thought that was really interesting. So we reported back to them about what we have recorded and what we found. We have logged over 90 plus hours between research, spirit profiling, investigation, and reviewing. We did find 2 female EVPs, which does show that they do have paranormal activity. And like I said, this client went public, so I can tell you where this building is. This building, Massillon Public Library. We have had a lot of experiences throughout the years. I'm proud to say that to my knowledge, we're the oldest active group in Stark County. Like I said, I had experiences when I was young, so has a lot of my team members. So it's been quite an adventure, and it's been really eye-opening. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of great people. Sherri is actually one of my mentors. I give her a lot of credit for late-night conversations and helping me along the way. So it's very interesting. I've experienced a lot of stuff. We have about 2,000 EVPs that we recorded over the years. Some photos, we have them at our website, and we have them at our Facebook page. So I have just a couple minutes left, but I'd like to recognize my team, because while I founded the group, I could not be this far without the help of my team, and they have been such a blessing to me. We have Angela, who's been with the group for 12 years. We have my wife, Lena, who helped found the group. She's been there since the start. We have Caitlin, who's been with the group for 6 years. Not present is our team member, Rick, who's been with the group for 8 years. And my sister-in-law, Carolyn, who's been with the group since we got started also. And without them, I wouldn't be able to be up here and talk today. So thank you all. I appreciate that, all your hard work and dedication. Like I said, we have a website. If you haven't grabbed a business card, please do so and check out our website. We have some of our EVPs. Our Facebook page, we have updates of what we're doing and some of our photos. And from myself and every member of the Massillon Paranormal Research Association, we thank everyone for coming here tonight for our presentation on the paranormal. We are committed to helping those who are having paranormal problems, and through this gain a better understanding of ghosts and spirits. A haunting may have similar characteristics, but no 2 ghosts are alike. Each remain for their own reasons, but each of them have their own personalities. How the spirit was in life is how they are in death. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay, well, I'd like to say thank you to our 3 wonderful presenters. I think that we owe them a big round of applause, honestly, so thank you so much. To our audience, both in person and those viewing online, we want to thank you all so much for joining us. For those of you that are here in the room with us, please make sure to stop by each of the merchandise tables. I know that Dana has some little gift boxes as well that she would like to give out. And other than that, please have a safe and wonderful weekend. We'll now be ending our live stream and moving on to the Q&A portion of our program.